I saw the Diddy episode that Netflix refused to release, and they paid me $50,000 to stay silent about it. That was 5 years ago. There were 13 of us in that screening room. Now only 4 of us still exist. The others did not die. They were erased. Their families do not remember them. Their photos vanished. Their entire lives were rewritten like they never happened. I am breaking my Inda today because I finally understand the truth. We were not there to watch an episode. We were there to complete a ritual. And staying silent is what keeps it alive. It started with an email that should not have reached me. I was 26 years old in October of 2019, living in a 400 square foot studio in Burbank, eating ramen 3 times a day, and convinced my film degree was the most expensive mistake of my life. I had been applying to production assistant jobs for 8 months. My bank account had $217 in it. I was 2 weeks away from moving back to my parents' house in Ohio, which felt like admitting I had failed at everything I ever wanted. The email arrived at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. The subject line read, "Exclusive Netflix screening opportunity compensation provided." I almost deleted it. It looked like spam, but the sender address was legitimate, a Netflix corporate domain, not some phishing scheme with misspelled words. I opened it. The message was brief and professional. Netflix was conducting a private test screening for an unreleased documentary episode. They needed audience feedback before deciding whether to move forward with the project. The screening would take place in Los Angeles. 6 hours of viewing, $50,000 for my participation, and signed confidentiality agreement. Travel and accommodation provided if needed. $50,000. I read it 7 times. I checked the sender domain again. I searched for the coordinator's name listed at the bottom. Marcus Hendry, Senior Content Analyst. His LinkedIn profile existed. His photo looked corporate and boring. 200 connections. Recommendations from people with Netflix listed in their job history. Everything checked out. But something felt wrong in a way I could not name. The email specified I had been selected based on my demographic profile and viewing history. It did not explain how they got my information or why I qualified. The screening was scheduled for Saturday, 3 days away. The location was not the main Netflix headquarters in Los Gatos. It was an address in Simi Valley, about an hour outside Los Angeles, listed as a secondary research facility. I should have questioned why they needed to pay $50,000 for 6 hours of feedback. I should have wondered why the turnaround was so fast. I should have asked why they could not conduct this screening at their main campus. But I was desperate, and desperation makes you ignore the warnings your gut is screaming at you. I replied within 10 minutes. I confirmed my attendance. I signed the preliminary digital agreement they sent back immediately. The agreement was standard. Do not discuss unreleased content. Do not record or photograph anything. Do not share details about the screening process. I had signed similar forms before for early movie screenings in college. This seemed like the same thing, just with a much bigger paycheck attached. The money arrived in my account the next morning. Not after the screening, before. $25,000, with a note that the second half would be transferred upon completion. I stared at my bank balance for 20 minutes. I had never seen that many zeros next to my name. Saturday came faster than I expected. I drove to Simi Valley following the GPS coordinates they provided. The facility was tucked away in an industrial area, surrounded by empty lots and warehouses that looked abandoned. The building itself was unmarked, no Netflix logo, no signage at all. Just a gray concrete structure with a single glass door and a keypad entry system. I texted the number they provided. The door buzzed open 30 seconds later. Inside was sterile. White walls, fluorescent lighting, a small reception desk with nobody behind it. A hallway stretched ahead, ending at a single door. I could hear voices coming from behind it. Other people were already there. I walked down the hallway. My footsteps echoed too loudly. The door at the end was heavy, the kind you see in recording studios. Soundproof. I pushed it open. 12 people were already seated in a circular arrangement. 13 chairs total. The last one was clearly meant for me. They all turned to look at me when I entered, and I will never forget the feeling I had in that moment. We were all the same, not in appearance. We were different ages, different races, different backgrounds, but we all had the same look in our eyes. Hungry, desperate. People who needed that money badly enough to ignore the strangeness of the situation. Marcus Hendry stood at the center of the circle. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Welcome," he said. "Now that everyone has arrived, we can begin the preparation process." He gestured to a table near the door where I had entered. 13 sealed plastic bags sat in a row, each labeled with a name. "Please place all electronic devices, jewelry, and watches in your designated bag. They will be returned after the screening." What none of us realized was that we had just sealed our fate the moment we walked through that door. The screening room had no windows. 13 chairs formed a perfect circle, each positioned exactly the same distance from the center, where a small table held a single black candle. The candle was not lit. I thought it was a strange decorative choice for a corporate screening, but I was too focused on the money to question it. A massive screen curved along one wall, wrapping around us like we were sitting inside a dome. The sound system was already humming at a frequency I could feel in my chest. Marcus Hendry stood near the door after we had surrendered our belongings. He held a tablet and wore the same unsettling smile. "The episode is approximately 6 hours in total runtime. There will be no intermissions. Bathroom breaks will forfeit your participation and compensation. Food and water are prohibited during viewing to maintain continuity of experience. If you need to leave for any medical emergency, press the button on your armrest." Are there any questions? Nobody asked anything. We were all too afraid of losing the money. Excellent. The screening will begin in 60 seconds. Please remain seated throughout the entire presentation. Your feedback is vital to this project. He left through the door. I heard it lock from the outside. The lights dimmed until we sat in complete darkness. My heart rate spiked. I gripped the armrests and told myself this was normal, just an unusual screening setup. The person next to me was breathing heavily. Someone across the circle coughed. Then the screen ignited with light. The Netflix logo appeared. The sound was deafening, vibrating through the floor and into my bones. But something was wrong with the logo. It flickered. The red shifted to a deeper crimson, almost black. The animation lasted too long, looping 3 times before finally dissolving. Text appeared. A Netflix original documentary. Then The Empire, Inside Diddy's World. The episode opened with aerial shots of Los Angeles at night. The footage was beautiful, but unsettling. The colors were oversaturated. Everything looked too vivid, too bright, like reality had been turned up past its natural limit. A bass-heavy beat pulsed underneath, rhythmic and hypnotic. Diddy appeared on screen, standing in what looked like a massive penthouse. He wore all white. He stared directly into the camera and smiled. "You have been chosen," he said. "You are here because you are ready to see what others cannot." I felt my stomach turn. This did not sound like a documentary. This sounded scripted, rehearsed, like he was speaking to us specifically. The footage cut to a party. Hundreds of people dancing, drinking. celebrating in a space that looked both luxurious and wrong. The camera lingered on faces in the crowd. It would zoom in slowly on one person, hold for 5 seconds, then move to another. The faces were beautiful but vacant, eyes open but not present. And I started recognizing patterns in how they moved. Everyone swayed at the same rhythm. Everyone turned their heads at the exact same moment. Diddy's voice continued over the footage. Power is not taken. It is given. It is transferred. It requires willing participants. It requires witnesses. The word witnesses echoed 7 times, each repetition layered over the previous one until it became a distorted hum. I wanted to look away from the screen, but I could not. My eyes were locked on the images. The party footage continued, but now the camera was moving through hallways, through rooms I did not recognize. Symbols were carved into the walls, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. I felt dizzy. My mouth was dry. The episode shifted again. Now it showed Diddy sitting in a chair in a dark room. Behind him, 13 figures stood in a circle. Their faces were obscured. He began speaking in a language I did not recognize. The words were guttural and rhythmic. Subtitles appeared at the bottom of the screen, but they were not translations. They were symbols, the same symbols I had seen carved into the walls. Time started to feel wrong. I could not tell if I had been watching for 10 minutes or 2 hours. My body felt heavy, like I was sinking into the chair. I tried to move my hand. It would not respond. Panic flooded through me, but even the panic felt distant, muffled. The footage changed again, and this time my blood turned to ice. The screen showed a room, 13 people sitting in a circle, a curved screen on the wall. I recognized the chairs. I recognized the layout. It was us. It was this room. The camera was filming us from somewhere I could not see, and the feed was playing in real time on the screen we were watching. I saw myself on screen, staring back at myself, eyes wide with horror. Diddy's voice returned, but now it was coming from multiple directions. From the speakers, from inside my head. The circle is complete. The witnesses have arrived. What you see cannot be unseen. What you hear cannot be unheard. You are bound. I tried to scream. My mouth would not open. I tried to stand. My legs were frozen. Around the circle, I could see others struggling, their bodies locked in place, their eyes reflecting the same terror I felt. The candle in the center of our circle ignited on its own. The flame burned black. And the episode continued. For hours. Images of things I cannot describe flashing across the screen. Sounds that should not exist tearing through my mind. Diddy's face repeating the same phrases in that unknown language. The symbols burning into my vision even when I closed my eyes. I felt something being pulled out of me. Not blood, not breath, something deeper. Something that made me who I was. At some point I lost consciousness. Or I thought I did. But I could still see the screen. I could still hear the voices. When the lights finally came back on, I knew with absolute certainty that I was not the same person who had entered that room. The fluorescent lights burned my eyes when they finally flickered back to life. I was slumped in the chair, my neck bent at an angle that should have been painful, but I felt nothing. My hands were clammy and shaking. Saliva had dried at the corner of my mouth. I looked around the circle and saw the others in similar states of disarray. A woman in her 40s was openly weeping, tears streaming down her face in complete silence. A young man across from me stared straight ahead at nothing, his jaw slack, his eyes glassy and unfocused. Another person was rocking back and forth, arms wrapped around their torso like they were trying to hold themselves together. Nobody spoke. We did not look at each other. We could not. The door opened, and Marcus Hendry entered carrying a leather briefcase. He looked exactly the same as he had 6 hours ago. Not tired, not disturbed, perfectly composed. He walked to the center of the circle where the black candle had burned down to a puddle of wax and surveyed us like a doctor examining patients after surgery. "Thank you for your participation," he said, his voice calm and clinical. "Your contribution to this project has been invaluable. We will now proceed with the exit documentation." He opened the briefcase and removed 13 manila folders, each labeled with our names. He walked around the circle, placing a folder on each of our laps. My hands trembled as I opened mine. The document inside was not the simple confidentiality agreement I had signed digitally 3 days ago. This was 40 pages long. The language was dense, archaic, filled with terms I had never seen in any legal document before. Words like eternal binding and perpetual witness and irrevocable soul clause jumped out at me from the text. I tried to focus, tried to read carefully, but my brain felt like it was wrapped in fog. The words blurred together. My eyes could not hold focus for more than a few seconds. "This is the comprehensive non-disclosure agreement," Marcus explained, walking back to the center. "It includes additional protections that were not present in your preliminary contract. You will notice the compensation has been adjusted accordingly. The remaining $25,000 will be transferred to your accounts within 1 hour of signing." I wanted to ask what eternal binding meant. I wanted to demand an explanation for what we had just experienced. But my throat felt sealed shut. The air in the room was thick and suffocating. Around the circle, people were signing. Their hands moved mechanically, flipping pages, scrawling signatures at the bottom of each one. They looked hypnotized. I watched a man in his 30s sign his name 17 times without reading a single word. The woman who had been crying now sat motionless, pen in hand, tears still wet on her cheeks as she signed page after page. I looked down at the document again. A clause on page 12 caught my attention. Participant acknowledges that verbal or written disclosure of screening content will result in immediate and irreversible consequences, as outlined in Section 7, Subsection 14, Paragraph C. I flipped frantically to Section 7. The text was in Latin. I did not understand Latin. "Sign the document," Marcus said, and his voice was no longer polite. It was a command. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. My hand picked up the pen without my permission. I watched myself sign the first page, then the second, then the third. I was screaming inside my head, telling my hand to stop, but my body would not obey. I signed all 40 pages in less than 3 minutes. Marcus collected the folders one by one, his movements precise and ritualistic. When he had gathered all 13, he placed them back in the briefcase and locked it with a key he wore on a chain around his neck. "You are free to retrieve your belongings and leave. A car will take each of you to your requested destination. Do not attempt to contact each other. Do not discuss what you have witnessed here. The terms of your agreement are now active." The door opened again. We stood in unison, moving like puppets on strings, and filed out of the screening room. My legs felt weak. The hallway seemed longer than it had been when I arrived. At the reception area, our sealed bags sat on the desk. I grabbed mine and stumbled toward the exit. Outside, black SUVs lined the curb. Drivers stood beside each vehicle holding tablets with our names displayed. I found mine and climbed into the back seat without looking at anyone else. The door closed. The driver said nothing. We pulled away from the facility in silence. I checked my phone. It was 7:15 in the evening. I had entered the building at noon. 6 hours and 15 minutes had passed, but it felt like days. It felt like years. My bank account notification appeared on my screen. Transfer complete. $25,000. $50,000 total now sat in my account. Blood money. I felt sick. The drive back to my apartment took 40 minutes. When the SUV dropped me off, I went inside, locked every door, closed every window, and sat on my bathroom floor with the lights on. I could still see the symbols when I closed my eyes. I could still hear that language echoing in my skull. That night, I dreamed I was back in the circle. But this time, when I looked at the screen, I saw my entire life playing in reverse. My childhood, my memories, everything that made me who I was being rewound and erased. And Diddy stood in the center of the circle, watching with that same cold smile as 13 candles burned black around him. I woke up screaming at 4 a.m. My nose was bleeding. I had no idea why. Over the next 3 weeks, I would try to convince myself it was just a bad experience, a weird experimental film that had messed with my head. But then the first person disappeared, and I realized we had not been watching something. We had become part of something that would never let us go. The symbols started appearing everywhere. 3 days after the screening, I saw one carved into the bark of a tree outside my apartment. A week later, the same geometric pattern appeared in the foam of my coffee. I found it drawn in dust on my car windshield, burned into the concrete of a sidewalk I walked every day. Nobody else seemed to notice them. But I saw them constantly, and every time I did, my chest tightened and my vision blurred at the edges. I tried to research what we had watched. I searched for any mention of a Diddy documentary that Netflix had shelved. Nothing existed. No production announcements. No leaked information. No gossip on industry forums. It was like the episode had never been made. Or it existed in a space outside of normal reality. I became obsessed with finding the other participants. I had not looked at them closely during the screening, too focused on my own terror, but I remembered faces. I remembered the woman who cried and the young man who stared at nothing. I needed to know if they were experiencing the same things I was. I needed to know I was not losing my mind. On November 8th, exactly 19 days after the screening, I received a text from an unknown number. It said, "We need to talk." Same thing is happening to me. Coffee shop on Ventura and Laurel Canyon. Tomorrow at 2. I went. I had to. 2 people were already sitting at a corner table when I arrived. A woman in her early 30s with dark circles under her eyes, and a man around my age who looked like he had not slept in weeks. We did not exchange names. We did not need to. We recognized each other immediately. "The symbols," the woman said before I even sat down. "You are seeing them too." I nodded. The man pulled out his phone and showed me photos he had taken. Dozens of images, the patterns appearing on street signs, in cloud formations, on the screens of turned-off televisions. Every single one matched what I had been seeing. "There were 13 of us," the man said, his voice shaking. "I have been trying to find the others. I found contact information for 7 people. 4 numbers are disconnected. 2 never responded. Then there is you 2. What about the other 6? I asked. The woman leaned forward. "That is the problem." I tried to look up one of them. A guy named David Chin. He was sitting 3 chairs to my left. I remembered him clearly because he was wearing a Stanford hoodie. I found his social media. But when I scrolled through his photos, something was wrong. There were pictures from places he supposedly visited, pictures with friends and family. But they looked fake, not photoshopped. Worse. Like they were generated. like someone had created an entire false history for him. I drove to his listed address, the man added. An apartment in Koreatown. The landlord said nobody by that name had ever lived there. The lease was under a completely different person. I showed him a photo. He said he had never seen that face before in his life. My blood ran cold. What are you saying? I am saying David Chin does not exist anymore, the woman whispered. Or maybe he never existed. Or maybe we are remembering someone who has been erased. We sat in silence for a long moment. The coffee shop felt too bright, too loud, too normal for the conversation we were having. There is more, the man said. He pulled out a notebook filled with frantic handwriting. I have been tracking everyone I can remember from that room. 5 people are completely gone. Not dead, gone. Their social media accounts still exist, but all the posts are generic. Their families do not remember them. I called the mother of one woman who was there. I asked about her daughter. The mother said she never had a daughter. She has a son. When I described the woman I remembered, she hung up on me. The woman started crying quietly. This is not possible. People cannot just stop existing. But we all knew it was possible. We had felt something being taken from us in that room. We had signed documents with language that promised irreversible consequences. We had participated in something that was never meant to be witnessed by human eyes. We need to stick together, I said. The 3 of us. We keep each other grounded. We remember each other. Maybe that is how we stay real. They agreed. We exchanged real contact information. We promised to check in every single day. We made a pact. If one of us disappeared, the other 2 would remember. We would fight against the erasure. That was the last time I saw either of them. The man stopped responding to messages 6 days later. I went to his apartment. A different person answered the door. They had lived there for 3 years, they said. Nobody matching his description had ever been a tenant. The woman lasted 2 weeks longer. Her final text to me said, I told my sister about the screening. I should not have. I feel like I am fading. If I disappear, please remember the message cut off. She never sent another one. I was now alone with my memories, and I was starting to understand that remembering might be the most dangerous thing I could do. I stopped sleeping after the woman vanished. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the circle. I saw the 13 chairs. I saw the black candle burning in the center. And I saw empty spaces where people used to be, their absence somehow more visible than their presence had ever been. I started taking pills to stay awake. Caffeine, supplements, anything to keep my mind alert and my eyes open, because sleep felt like surrender. And I was terrified of what might happen if I let my guard down. I became a ghost in my own life. I stopped going to job interviews. I stopped answering calls from my parents. I spent 18 hours a day in front of my laptop, searching for answers. I needed to understand what had been done to us. I needed to know what we had participated in. The internet is full of dark corners if you know where to look. Forums where people discuss occult rituals. Websites dedicated to conspiracy theories about entertainment industry practices. Message boards where former production assistants share stories about projects that should not exist. I dove into all of it, reading until my eyes burned and my head pounded. I found a thread on an archived forum from 2011. Someone claimed they had been invited to a private viewing experience for a major streaming company. 13 participants. 6 hours. Significant payment. The person described symptoms identical to mine. Symbols appearing everywhere. Memory distortions. A feeling of being watched constantly. The thread ended abruptly. The user never posted again. Their account was deleted. I found 4 more similar stories scattered across different platforms over the span of 8 years. Always 13 people. Always 6 hours. Always the same aftermath. None of the original posters could be traced. Their digital footprints ended the moment they tried to share what happened. Then I discovered something that made my hands shake so violently I had to step away from the computer. A book, published in 1876, written by a French occultist named Guillaume Marchand. The title translated to The Geometry of Witnessing. It was not available in any library, not sold in any bookstore, but someone had uploaded scanned pages to an obscure digital archive. I downloaded every page. Marchand wrote about rituals that required willing observers to create what he called perpetual events. According to his research, certain actions could only achieve permanence if they were witnessed by a specific number of people who had consented to participate. 13 was a sacred number in these rituals. 13 witnesses created a stable loop. Their collective attention became the fuel that kept the ritual alive outside of linear time. But there was a cost. The witnesses would be slowly consumed by what they had seen. Their identities would be drained, piece by piece, until nothing remained but empty vessels that existed only to observe. The ritual fed on their life force, their memories, their very existence. And the only way to break the cycle was for all 13 witnesses to be consumed completely. I read that passage 12 times. My entire body went numb. We were not victims of some bizarre experiment. We were batteries. We were fuel. The episode we watched was designed to trap us in an eternal viewing loop. And as long as any of us remained, the ritual continued to feed. I found more. Marchand described how these rituals were often disguised as entertainment. Theater performances in the 18th century, private film screenings in the early 20th century. The method evolved with technology, but the mechanism remained the same. Gather 13 people, show them something that should not exist, bind them through contract and consent, then slowly erase them as the ritual consumes what makes them human. The book included symbols, the same ones I had been seeing everywhere. They were markers, signs that the ritual was still active and still feeding. Every time I saw one, it meant the connection was being reinforced. It meant I was being pulled deeper into the loop. I slammed the laptop shut and paced my apartment for 2 hours. My mind was racing. If Marchand was right, then 9 of us were already gone. That meant 4 remained. But I only knew about myself. The other 3 were out there somewhere, being erased just like I was. And we had no way to find each other, because making contact meant risking disappearance. I needed physical proof. I needed to find that building in Simi Valley. I needed to see if the screening room still existed. Maybe if I could destroy the space where it happened, I could break the connection. Maybe I could stop the ritual before it consumed the rest of us. I grabbed my keys and left my apartment at 3 a.m. The drive to Simi Valley felt longer than it should have. The roads were empty. Streetlights flickered as I passed under them. Twice, I saw the symbols spray painted on overpasses. When I finally reached the industrial area, my stomach dropped. The building was exactly as I remembered it, but every instinct I had screamed that going inside would be the last autonomous choice I would ever make. The building should have been abandoned. It should have been dark, locked, forgotten, but light glowed behind the frosted windows. Not the harsh fluorescent lighting from before. This was softer, warmer, inviting. I sat in my car across the street for 20 minutes, watching, waiting for any sign of movement inside. Nothing, just that steady, pulsing glow. I crossed the empty street and approached the entrance. The glass door was unlocked. It swung open at my touch, and that same sterile hallway stretched before me. White walls, gray carpet, the smell of something burning, faint but present, like incense left smoldering for days. My footsteps echoed as I walked toward the screening room. The door at the end of the hall was open. Just a crack, enough to see flickering light spilling out from inside. I pushed it wider, and my breath caught in my throat. The room was pristine, untouched. The 13 chairs still formed their perfect circle. The curved screen glowed with static, casting dancing shadows across the walls. And in the center, where the black candle had burned 5 months ago, another candle sat waiting, unlit, but ready. I stepped inside, and the door closed behind me with a heavy thud that vibrated through my bones. I spun around. No one was there. The door had no handle on the inside. The screen flickered. The static cleared, and the episode began playing. I saw the Netflix logo. I saw Diddy in his white suit. I heard his voice saying, "You have been chosen," exactly as he had said it before. But this time I was not paralyzed. I could move. I could think clearly. And I realized something horrifying. This was not a recording. This was happening now, in real time. The ritual had never stopped. It had been playing on a continuous loop since the moment we left this room. I walked closer to the screen. The party footage played, the faces swaying in unison, the symbols carved into walls. Then the camera cut to the circle of 13 chairs, and I saw them. The 9 people who had disappeared. They were sitting in their original positions, staring straight ahead at the screen, mouths slightly open, eyes reflecting the glow. They were not watching anymore. They were part of the episode, trapped inside the footage itself. My legs nearly gave out. I grabbed the back of the nearest chair to steady myself. That was when I noticed the woman from the coffee shop sitting 3 seats to my right, not physically present, but there on the screen, in her chair, watching with the same vacant expression as the others. 10 gone, 3 remaining. I turned toward the center of the circle. The candle ignited on its own. Black flame. No heat, just cold, suffocating darkness radiating outward. Diddy appeared on the screen again, but this time he was not in the penthouse or at the party. He was here, in this room, standing in the center of the circle. I could see myself on the screen, standing exactly where I was standing now, looking at him. "The witness who returns becomes the anchor," his voice said, not from the speakers, but from everywhere at once. "The one who seeks to break the binding becomes the one who completes it." I understood then. Coming back here was not an act of defiance. It was exactly what the ritual needed. By returning, by seeking answers, by trying to destroy what had been created, I had volunteered myself as the final piece. The screen showed all 13 chairs now occupied, 10 trapped in the footage, 2 others somewhere in the world, fading, and me, standing in the room, about to join them. I tried to run. The door would not open. I tried to scream. No sound came out. The symbols on the walls began glowing, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The black candle flame grew taller, reaching toward the ceiling, and I felt that same pulling sensation from the original screening. Something vital being drained from my core. The chairs began to fill, not with physical bodies, with echoes, shadows of the people we used to be before we signed those documents and gave our consent. I fell to my knees as the screen consumed my vision. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was my own face on the screen, sitting in the 13th chair, eyes empty, watching forever. I woke up in my apartment. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Birds chirped outside. My phone alarm was ringing. It was Tuesday morning. I sat up in bed, disoriented and nauseous. My clothes were soaked with sweat. My hands were shaking. But I was home. Not in that building. Not trapped in the screen. Had it been a dream? Had I imagined driving to Simi Valley? I checked my car keys. They were on my nightstand, exactly where I always left them. I checked my browser history. No searches about occult rituals or Guillaume Marchand. Nothing. My laptop showed I had spent the previous evening watching YouTube videos and browsing social media like a normal person. But I remembered everything. The building, the screen, the 10 faces trapped in the footage, my own reflection staring back at me from the 13th chair. I stumbled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. When I looked up at the mirror, I froze. There was a symbol drawn on the glass in condensation, fresh, like someone had traced it with their finger moments ago. The same geometric pattern I had been seeing for months. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop searching. Stop remembering. Let it fade. I deleted the message immediately. Then I deleted my entire text history. I threw my research notebooks in the trash. I cleared every bookmark related to the screening. I was done. Whatever was happening, I would not participate anymore. I would forget. I would move on. I would survive by letting go. Days passed. Then weeks. I forced myself back into normal life. I took a job at a coffee shop. I called my parents. I went on dates. I pretended the screening never happened. And slowly, it started to work. The symbols appeared less frequently. The nightmares faded. My memories of that room became hazy, distant, like something I had watched in a movie years ago. But there were gaps I could not explain. Whole days where I could not account for my time. Hours that vanished without a trace. I would find myself standing in my apartment with no memory of how I got there. I would wake up in strange places, fully dressed, my shoes muddy, my hands dirty. One morning, I discovered a folder on my desktop labeled Project Witness. I did not remember creating it. Inside were hundreds of video files. Each one was 6 hours long. Each one was titled with a date and a number. Dates stretching back 5 months. 13 files total. I opened the most recent one. It showed a screening room, 13 chairs in a circle. And me, sitting in the 13th position, staring at a screen. My expression was blank. My eyes were open, but empty. The timestamp showed it had been recorded last night while I was sleeping, or while I thought I was sleeping. I clicked through the other files. Every single one showed me in that chair. Different dates, same position, same vacant stare. I had been returning to that building over and over, and I had no memory of any of it. The ritual had not trapped me in the footage. It had made me into something worse. A repeating witness. A person who existed only to observe. Someone who could live a normal life during the day but returned every night to complete the cycle. I was not escaping the ritual. I was becoming it. I am telling you this because I finally understand what I signed in that room. The document was not a non-disclosure agreement. It was a transfer of ownership. I gave them permission to use me, to hollow me out, to turn me into a permanent observer for something that should not exist. There are not 4 of us left. There is only me. The others are gone, or they have become what I am becoming. Shells that walk through the world pretending to be human while feeding the ritual every night. The $50,000 is still in my account. I have not spent a single cent. Every time I think about touching that money, I feel nauseous. Because I know now what it was payment for. Not my silence, my existence. And here is what terrifies me most. I am breaking the INDA right now by telling you this story, which means the consequences outlined in that document are about to activate. I should be erased. I should disappear like the others. But I am still here, still talking, still remembering, which means I am not breaking the rules. I am following them. Sharing this story is not a violation. It is part of the ritual. Every person who hears what I experienced, every person who visualizes that screening room, every person who imagines those 13 chairs becomes connected to it. You are the expansion. The new circle, and I cannot remember how many people I have already told.